They called me ungrateful, sold my laptop, and kicked me out on my birthday. But it wasn't just about the laptop. It was the forgotten birthdays, the forced silence, and the kind of love I had to earn. On my 22nd birthday, I couldn't take it anymore. What I did next didn't just change my life, it exposed everything they'd been hiding. If you've ever felt invisible, keep listening. My name is Elise Harper, and I turned 22 the day my world collapsed in on itself like a house built on lies. It was supposed to be just another quiet morning. I had an early shift at the campus coffee shop and came downstairs at 6:45 a.m., the smell of burnt toast lingering in the air like disappointment. My mother, as usual, sat at the kitchen table scrolling through Facebook, her robe half open, a lukewarm coffee cupped in her hand. She didn't look up. "Happy birthday," she mumbled, still thumbing through her phone. "Thanks, Mom," I said, hoping foolishly for more. Maybe a card. A cupcake. A hug. But she didn't even glance up. Instead, she added, "Don't forget you're driving Madison to her friend's party this evening." It was my birthday. And I was the chauffeur. Again. I bit my lip, nodded silently, and went to grab my bag. On the counter sat my most treasured possession, my MacBook Pro. I had saved for nearly a year, working double shifts at the cafe, skipping movies, saying no to dinners out with friends. It held my thesis, my job applications, my resume, and years of writing poems, letters, photos. My entire life was saved in those files. I placed it carefully in my bag the way you might cradle a fragile keepsake and headed out. At 10:07 a.m. during my break, I got a text from my father. "Sold your laptop. Madison needs a new phone. Be grateful we feed you." At first, I thought I misread it. I blinked, read it again. My heart dropped into my stomach. I called him. No answer. Another text came through. "Also, you'll be covering her tuition. $6,000 by Friday." I sat there in the alley behind the cafe, cup of black coffee trembling in my hands, the wind biting through my barista apron. The noise of the street faded. I couldn't breathe. My laptop. My property. Bought with my money. Gone. And now they expected me to pay tuition for my sister Madison, the same sister who had dropped out of 3 different programs in the last 2 years because she didn't like the vibe or needed a break. I typed the only words I could muster. "No chance." His reply was immediate. "Then get out. You're cut off." I stared at the screen for a long moment, the words blurring. Then I stood, went back in, and somehow finished my shift. I smiled at customers, poured lattes, faked conversation. But inside something was cracking. I drove home on autopilot, each streetlight bleeding into the next. My mind was racing. Where would I go? What about my schoolwork, my savings, the bills? When I got home, I tried to stay calm. But everything inside me was thrumming with betrayal. I went to my room, the one I'd grown up in, and closed the door. There was a time I thought this house meant safety. Now it just felt like a cage I hadn't noticed was locked until I tried to leave. I texted Olivia. "Can I come over?" Her response came back instantly. "Of course. I'm here." What happened? I didn't reply. I couldn't yet. Instead, I stared at my room, the faded posters, the framed photo of me and Madison from when we were small. Back when we still smiled together. Back when I didn't know what favoritism looked like. This wasn't the first time they took something from me. When I was 16, my parents canceled my birthday party because Madison had a last-minute soccer tournament. At 18, my grandparents' graduation gift, a check meant for me, was somehow funneled into the down payment for Madison's first car. When I questioned it, my father had said, "She needs it more than you do. You're responsible. She's fragile." I was tired of being the responsible one. The one they could bleed dry and call it love. I shoved some clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my toothbrush, deodorant, birth certificate, the few sentimental books I couldn't live without. Then I went to my desk, opened the drawer, and found the empty slot where my laptop should have been. That's when the tears came. Not loud or dramatic. Just a quiet, aching grief. A grief for what was lost and what had never really been there. At 11:42 p.m., I slipped down the stairs, bag slung over my shoulder. The house was dark except for the hallway light. A picture of our family smiled down at me from the wall, my dad's arm wrapped around my mom Madison in the middle beaming and me on the edge half smile frozen. I opened the door, stepped outside into the cold and didn't look back. But as I pulled away from the curb, a single thought formed. They think I'll just disappear, but I won't. Not this time. And that's when the idea came to me. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg. I would build something. Something irrefutable. Something they couldn't ignore. They took my laptop. But they forgot I never needed technology to write a story. I am the story. By the time I pulled up in front of Olivia's apartment, the ache in my chest had settled into something heavier like grief wrapped in exhaustion. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Elise," she said, no questions, just open arms. I collapsed into her. I didn't sob, didn't say a word. I just let her hold me while my body tried to remember what safety felt like. Inside, the apartment smelled like lavender and vanilla. Something warm simmered on the stove and the lights were soft, not fluorescent, and cold like home. Olivia always knew how to create calm. She had a way of making space for people without asking for anything in return. I sank onto her couch and finally said it. "They sold my laptop." She stared at me. "Wait." What? I showed her the texts. Her eyes scanned them, her mouth tightening with each line. "They sold it. The one you saved a year for." I nodded, hands still trembling. "And now they want you to pay Madison's tuition." I gave a bitter laugh. $6,000 by Friday. Or I'm cut off. Which, I guess, I already am. Olivia didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat beside me, her hand on my back. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. This is insane." I looked around her apartment, the plants on the windowsill, the coffee mug with the chipped handle, the messy pile of mail by the door. It was imperfect, lived in, and somehow more like home than anywhere I'd ever known. "They've always done this," I murmured. "Not just the laptop." She turned toward me. "Remember my 16th birthday?" She nodded slowly. "My parents canceled my party last minute. Madison had a surprise soccer game. I didn't even get a cake." I closed my eyes. "And when we graduated? You were there, right? I won that scholarship. The dean announced my name, and just as I was walking on stage." "Your mom stopped you," Olivia said, remembering. She grabbed my arm to show me a text. "Madison made junior varsity cheer captain." She said, "Isn't that amazing news?" "I've never wanted to throw a phone more in my life," Olivia muttered. I let the memory sit. There were so many of them. Layers of silence, sacrifice, and invisible wounds. My grandparents gave me $2,000 when I graduated, I said softly. It was supposed to go into a college fund. Dad used it for Madison's car down payment. Olivia's eyes flashed. "What?" He said. "I didn't need a car because I could walk to campus." Madison had cheer practice. She was quiet, her jaw tight, and I could feel it, not just her anger but her helplessness. The pain of watching someone you love be worn down over and over and never being able to stop it. I was taught that keeping the peace was more important than speaking up, I said. That family was everything. That being the bigger person meant letting people walk all over me and calling it maturity. Olivia stood and poured us both tea, jasmine my favorite. When she came back, she looked at me differently. Not with pity, but with quiet admiration. "You're not crazy, Elise. This is abuse, emotional, financial. They've been taking from you for years." I stared into the mug. I didn't want to call it that. Abuse felt too dramatic. Too big. It's not too big. What they've done is big. I nodded. The word sat heavily but truthfully. Abuse? I reached for my phone and hesitated. Then I scrolled to Diane Harper. My dad's sister. The only one in the family who had ever seen through him. She picked up after 2 rings. "Elise. Happy birthday, sweetheart." I blinked. My throat caught. "You remembered." Of course I did. I told her everything. Every word. Every receipt I never got back. Every moment I swallowed pain so my parents could pretend everything was fine. I expected her to be shocked, maybe even skeptical. But Diane just sighed. I'm so sorry, she said. Frank, he's always put Madison first. Your grandparents tried to talk to him about it years ago. He refused to listen. I don't know what to do, I whispered. He kicked me out, and I have nothing. They took everything I worked for. You have me, Diane said firmly. You always have. You can stay here if you need to. I'll come get you right now if you want. I glanced at Olivia, who gave a small supportive nod. I'm okay here for now, I said, but thank you. I mean it, Elise. Your parents crossed a line. You don't owe them silence. We hung up and I felt something shift. A rope loosening. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding finally released. Later that night, Olivia made us grilled cheese and soup. I stayed up staring at the ceiling watching the shadows move. The house I grew up in had never really been home. It had been a place of expectations, of roles assigned too early: Madison, the golden child who could do no wrong. Me, the fixer. The invisible one who filled the gaps, paid the bills, canceled her plans. But here in this tiny apartment wrapped in a borrowed blanket with the scent of lavender in the air, I started to believe that home might be something else entirely. Not a place, not a roof, but a choice, a space where you are seen, heard, respected, and maybe, just maybe, I could build that even if I had to start from scratch. It was nearly midnight when I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house looked different now, less like the place where I grew up and more like a stage where the wrong play had been performed for too many years. The porch light was off, but Madison's bedroom window glowed upstairs. Of course, she was still awake. She always lived like the world revolved around her schedule. I parked at the far end of the street, heart pounding louder with every step I took toward the front door. My key still worked. That wouldn't last much longer. Inside, the house was still. Silent. Like it knew something was coming. I crept up the stairs, careful not to wake my parents if they were even home. When I reached my room, I noticed the door was slightly open. A narrow strip of light spilled into the hallway. I pushed it gently. Madison was standing in front of my mirror, turning side to side, admiring herself. In my favorite black dress. My chest tightened. It was the one I'd bought with my first real paycheck, saved for weeks just to feel like I could wear something beautiful on my own terms. Sleek, understated, dignified. She looked at me in the reflection and didn't flinch. Oh, she said casually. It's you. What are you doing in my room? My voice was low but sharp. She ran her fingers down the side of the dress. Trying stuff on. Dad said you're moving out, so my things are fair game, I asked, trying not to shake. She shrugged. Mom said I could take whatever I want. You don't need this stuff for waitressing. The words were a slap. Not just because of the dismissal, but because they confirmed something deeper. They truly didn't see my life as real, my work as valid, or my boundaries as worth honoring. You're wearing my dress, I said again, because it was all I could do not to scream. And it looks better on me, she replied, giving a little twirl. I swallowed hard. Where's my laptop? Sold, she said brightly. Dad gave it to Mr. Landry next door. His daughter's starting college. He had no right, he got $1,200 for it. My phone only cost $800, so I get to keep the rest. She said it like a child who had won a prize at a carnival. I felt sick. That laptop cost me $2,000, I said, and a year of skipped meals and 12-hour shifts. Madison rolled her eyes. It's just a laptop, Elise. Don't be so dramatic. I clenched my fists. Did it occur to anyone that it wasn't his to sell? She plopped onto my bed, my comforter now half-torn, drawers open, and rummaged through, and said, You lived here rent-free. Don't act like you didn't owe them something. I never lived here rent-free, I snapped. I paid for groceries. For utilities. I covered bills when no one else could. She shrugged. Whatever. You're the responsible one. You like doing that stuff. My mouth went dry. No, I didn't like it. I did it because no one else would. Because someone had to keep the lights on. But I didn't say that. I couldn't, not yet. Instead, I walked past her and began packing clothes, toiletries, the few things they hadn't already taken or shared. Under the bed, I reached for my old suitcase. When I pulled it out, I spotted the metal tin wedged against the wall. I froze. It was still there. My emergency fund. $3,000 in rolled 20s and 50s. Hidden from the bank accounts my parents had insisted on managing. Hidden from the borrowing that never came back. I opened the tin, counted quickly. Intact. Relief surged through me, followed by something else, quiet fury. I stood and went to the closet where I'd kept an old shoebox tucked behind unused coats. Inside were folders. Notebooks. Receipts. I hadn't planned it this way, not at first, but over the years, I'd learned to keep records. To document the lies. The IOUs that became never wills. The bank withdrawals I didn't remember authorizing. I flipped through them. A printout showing $500 withdrawn the week of Madison's prom. Receipts for household repairs billed to my debit card. Notes of every favor I'd done, paying mom's dental bill, covering dad's insurance copay when his job forgot to reimburse him. 6 years of nickel and dime theft justified by family comes first. Except I was never the one they put first. I sat on the edge of my stripped bed, the box of records in my lap, and I realized this wasn't just about a laptop. It never had been. That computer was the culmination of every moment I'd clawed back my own freedom. It was mine fully. Proof that I could build something without them. They hadn't just sold a machine, they'd tried to erase that truth. But they didn't know what I'd been keeping. I looked at the folders, the evidence, the numbers that told a story clearer than any confrontation ever could. Then a thought emerged. Clean, sharp. Make it undeniable. I would create a folder, not just of receipts but of truth. A timeline. A record. A legacy of what had been taken from me. Not to hurt them. To end it. To put something on the table so final, so undeniable they couldn't twist it. Couldn't pretend anymore that this was love. That this was normal. Madison stood, arms full of my scarves. So are you really gonna pay for my tuition? She asked, as if we were discussing chores. I turned slowly. Number. She raised an eyebrow. Dad's gonna be pissed. I stared at her. He already is. She shrugged again. He promised the university already. Said you were gonna learn responsibility or something. I don't know. I think they're having money problems. Mom had to return a bunch of stuff she ordered. That piece of information landed differently. They were struggling. And I had been their safety net. For years. When Madison finally left, still wearing my dress, I got to work. I would take the broken pieces and bind them together with ink and paper. They sold my freedom. But I still had my voice. And I was going to use it. By the time the rest of the house was asleep, I was wide awake, surrounded by paper truth and finally a sense of direction. I worked methodically, like someone assembling evidence for a trial. Because in a way I was. The floor of my childhood bedroom had become a crime scene of another kind, stained not with blood but with years of invisible theft. I started with the bank statements. Every unauthorized withdrawal my father had made from my account was there. I highlighted each one, annotating them with the exact phrases he had used, just until payday. We're a family, this is what we do. You live here rent-free. Altogether, $8,347 taken in quiet, consistent acts of erasure. Then came the household bills. Electric, internet, gas. Many were in my name. Some were paid from my account without my knowledge. I'd been covering approximately 70% of our expenses since I turned 18 while taking full-time classes and working 2 jobs. Next, the loans. Receipts I'd kept, Venmo transfers I'd marked. Scribbled notes that once read, "Thank you, sweetie, we'll pay back soon," but the payback never came. The total $15,283. And that wasn't even counting emotional interest. Then I opened a folder I hadn't dared touch in years. It held letters from my grandparents sent when I graduated high school. One congratulated me for winning the essay competition, another referenced a scholarship fund they'd set aside in my name. When I turned 18, I'd asked about it. My father said the money had vanished due to market crashes. I believed him. But this time I dug deeper. Tucked in the envelope was a bank statement with my name on it. The account had been real and active until the year I turned 18. Systematic withdrawals month after month. Ending in a balance of $0. Total drained $22,500. Disappeared without explanation. I included everything. Even Madison's college transcripts, what little existed. 3 programs, 3 dropouts, no consequences. And finally the laptop. I found the purchase receipt in my inbox. The warranty. The insurance policy in my name. Screenshots of the model listed online for nearly $2. Proof it was worth far more than what they claimed. They hadn't just sold a machine. They had stolen my future, my work, my independence. But I wasn't here to beg for it back. I was here to make a record. For me. For the law. For anyone who ever asked why I left. I placed everything in a blue binder I found in my old desk drawer, labeled it in silver ink, The Truth. It felt like naming a wound after years of pretending it didn't bleed. Then I pulled out a single sheet of paper and wrote, "To whoever finds this first. This is not revenge. This is accountability. You've called me ungrateful for too long. But this is what I've given year after year, check after check." I kept records because no one believed me when I spoke. Maybe now the numbers will say what I never could. I didn't leave because I'm dramatic. I left because I finally understood peace is more important than keeping the illusion of family. This is the truth about who has really been feeding whom. Elise, I placed the folder on the kitchen table. Right in the center. Next to the bowl where we used to leave notes. Next to where my mother would sit scrolling through photos of other people's perfect families. It was 2 a.m. when I stepped out into the cold night, duffel in one hand, binder copies in the other. My car was already packed. But before I drove off, I made one more stop. The police station was quiet at this hour. The receptionist looked surprised when I walked in. "I need to file a report," I said. For what kind of incident? I hesitated, then spoke clearly. "Theft of personal property. A laptop." I gave them the details. The serial number. The receipt in my name. The sale to the neighbor without my permission. I didn't name my father, not yet. But I made the theft real. Legal. Documented. The officer raised an eyebrow as he filed the claim. "You sure you want to do this?" "I'm not pressing charges right now," I said, "but I want a record. In case this isn't the end." It wasn't anger that brought me there, it was clarity. I didn't want to punish them. I wanted it on file. For the day they tried to rewrite the story. When I finally arrived back at Olivia's, the sun was threatening the horizon. Pink streaks painted the edges of the sky like a soft warning. I didn't cry as I unlocked her door. I didn't collapse. I set the remaining copies of the folder on her table and curled up on the couch with my coat still on. Tomorrow they'd find the binder. They'd read the numbers. They'd see it all. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care how they reacted. Because I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for the girl they'd never protected. The one who finally decided she was worth saving. I managed 3 hours of sleep on Olivia's couch before the buzzing began. My phone, still buried at the bottom of my tote bag, trembled like it was alive. I reached for it groggily and blinked at the screen. 27 missed calls. 43 messages. 5 voicemails. They had found the folder. I sat up slowly, heart steady now. Not panicked, just prepared. The first text was from Madison. "What did you do? Mom's crying. Dad's freaking out. Call me." Then came the flood. "You're suing us. Are you insane? This is slander. You have no idea what you've done. You come home this instant and explain yourself. Brooke, please. We need to talk as a family." Then, as if that word still held meaning. The voicemails were no better. My mother's voice swung from outrage to pleading in under 5 minutes. "How dare you leave something like that in our house? This isn't how we resolve things, please, honey. We love you. We can explain everything." My father's tone was colder. "You ungrateful child. This is a betrayal. You'll regret this. You've humiliated us." But as the hours passed, even his fury softened into worry. "Let's talk reasonably. We can make an arrangement." They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of being exposed. And then came the most unexpected call of all. My phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. My thumb hovered before I answered. Grandma Elise. Her voice was clipped. Controlled. Not the usual soft-spoken woman who mailed birthday cards with pressed flowers and inspirational quotes. This was something else entirely. I just spoke to your father, she said. And I have no words. I waited. I had no idea things were this bad. Your grandfather and I are coming to town. We want to see you. Privately. Before we speak with Frank, I couldn't stop the tears from welling. Not because she was angry, but because she believed me. For the first time, someone from within that family tree looked at the pattern and didn't try to smooth it over. She wasn't here to keep peace. She was here for truth. After I hung up, Olivia emerged from her room holding 2 mugs of coffee. Judging by the buzzing, she said they've read the folder front to back, I murmured. You okay? I think so. She handed me the mug. Well, brace yourself. Because I may have told a few people what happened. An hour later, my apartment transformed into a makeshift command center of compassion. Jessica brought over her spare laptop, slightly dented but dependable. It's yours until you get back on your feet, she said. Nathan, a quiet computer science major I barely knew, showed up with an external hard drive and said he could help me recover anything saved to the cloud. Melissa arrived with groceries, casseroles, soup, pasta. Everything can be frozen, she said with a smile. And reheated in chaos. As I looked around Olivia's living room, blankets, strewn laptops, open, people I hadn't expected to show up. Showing up, I felt something settle in my chest. These weren't just friends. They were the family I'd been trying to earn through sacrifice. And unlike the one I was born into, this family didn't keep receipts. They gave without conditions. That night, as we packed up the folders, the texts still coming in waves, Olivia leaned against the doorframe and said, You know you may have started a revolution. I didn't want a war, I whispered. No, she replied. But sometimes peace begins by refusing to stay quiet. The next morning, Grandma Eleanor showed up at Olivia's with sharp heels and a sharper expression. She didn't ask to come in, she stepped in like she already owned the room. Elise, she said, pulling me into a tight hug. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining, but her jaw was set. We need to fix this. And I don't mean patch it, I mean investigate it. She pulled a thin folder from her handbag and placed it on the table. Your grandfather set up trust funds for you and Madison when you were born, she said. Equal ones. You were supposed to get control when you turned 18. I blinked. I never saw a cent. Because your father convinced the trustees you weren't ready. That you were irresponsible. I laughed short, bitter. He told me the fund had disappeared. Market crashes. He's been managing them as your legal custodian for years, she said. But we did some digging, and the numbers don't match. So you're saying I'm saying he's been using your trust to pay for Madison's expenses. After she burned through hers. The room spun. I worked double shifts, I whispered. Skipped sleep, missed deadlines. All because I thought I had no choice. Because they said there was nothing to help me. Eleanor nodded grimly. He wanted you to stay desperate, because desperate daughters don't ask questions. She reached out and squeezed my hand. But you did. And now we're going to get answers. I stared at her. My grandmother. Who always played peacekeeper. Who had for years looked away. Now she was looking right at me, and she was furious. There will be a full audit, she said. I've contacted the family attorney. Your father doesn't know yet. But he will. The folder, the voicemails, the police report. None of it had been revenge. It had been survival. And now justice. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew I wasn't alone. The family I'd lost wasn't the real loss. The real family, the one building itself around me now, was choosing me not because of obligation or appearances, but because they saw my worth. And that finally was enough. The day after Grandma Eleanor's visit, Aunt Claire showed up with a folder of her own and a look that told me the dam had finally broken. We sat at Olivia's kitchen table where so many truths had surfaced over the past week. But this one was different. This one was about what should have been mine. Elise Claire began, fingers laced tightly in front of her. I need to tell you something that may change everything. I nodded slowly. Okay. When you and Madison were born, your grandparents created identical educational trust funds for both of you. Equal amounts. Designed to cover college graduate school if needed, and the remaining balance would transfer to you at 25. I stared at her, not breathing. Your father was named interim custodian of the funds until you turned 18. That was the arrangement. When you reached legal adulthood, the funds were supposed to be handed over. They weren't, I said, my voice dry. He told me the market crashed. That the money had evaporated. Claire's jaw tightened. He lied. She opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, real ones showing the trust fund had been active until the year I started college. Then came a series of transfers, withdrawals with vague memos like tuition assistance and family needs support. My name was on the fund. But the money, it had been going elsewhere. To Madison, I said, the pieces falling together. Claire nodded. Yes. After she exhausted her own fund, your parents used your trust to continue covering her tuition, her housing, even her car. I felt cold. Numb. All those nights I skipped meals to avoid overdrawing my account. All the missed social events, the unpaid internships I couldn't accept because I needed work that paid. I hadn't been broke, I had been robbed. And the trustees, I asked. They let this happen. Your father convinced them you weren't financially mature enough to manage it, Claire replied bitterly. He showed them that you had declined a traditional dorm and said it was because you couldn't budget. He painted your independence as irresponsibility. I laughed, but it wasn't a sound of amusement. I chose to commute to save money. I worked 2 jobs while Madison flunked out of 3 programs. I know, Claire said quietly. We all saw it. But no one thought it was this bad. I swallowed hard. So he used my trust to cover her mistakes, and made me believe it never existed. And the worst part, she added, he's still the acting custodian. Until we formally revoke that power. How Eleanor answered the next morning when she called me back. Her voice was calm but steely. I've already spoken to the family lawyer. There will be a motion filed in probate court to remove Frank as trustee. We're also requesting a full audit going back 10 years. 10 years. My breath hitched. Is that enough, Elise? She said softly. We're also exploring criminal options. What your father did wasn't just unethical. It may be fraud. Misappropriation of assets. The word fraud hung in the air like thunder. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was legal, and it had never been about just one laptop. That afternoon, Madison showed up at Aunt Diane's house unexpectedly. Claire and I had just finished going over the documentation again when the doorbell rang. I hesitated. Should I talk to her? Claire looked at me carefully. That's up to you. But I think she's starting to see the cracks. When I opened the door, Madison looked different, almost like someone who'd aged overnight. Her eyes were puffy, mascara smudged. She clutched a paper bag. I brought your dress back, she said, holding it out. I took it silently. I didn't know, she said. You didn't know what I asked, not accusing, just exhausted. That the money came from your trust, she whispered. They told me it was from Grandpa. That it was a reward. I crossed my arms. And you never questioned how you kept getting rewarded for failing classes. I thought it was because I was trying, she said. Because I was struggling. Because I was the one who needed more. I blinked. And I wasn't. She looked down. You always seemed so capable, she murmured. So together. They said you liked working. That it gave you purpose. I let out a bitter breath. It gave me survival. That's not the same thing. We sat on the porch steps quiet for a while. Birds chirped. A dog barked down the street. It was such a normal afternoon for a conversation that felt anything but. They used us both, I said finally. In different ways. Madison nodded. They told me you volunteered to help. That you didn't want to go away for college. That you loved living at home. They didn't just take my money, Maddie. They rewrote my story. Madison wiped her eyes. I'm so sorry. I should have asked more questions. Her voice broke. I liked believing I was the one they loved most. Oof. There it was. Not said with cruelty, but with a painful raw honesty I hadn't expected. I turned to look at her. They didn't love either of us properly. She looked up. They used your need to control me. And they used my reliability to protect you from consequences. That's not love. That's manipulation dressed up as family values. We sat in silence again. Then Madison whispered, I want to fix it. You can't. She winced. But I added you can start doing the right things. Tell the truth. Speak up. Stop letting them pit us against each other. I will. And stop taking things that don't belong to you. She smiled weakly. Starting with the dress, I cracked a small smile. Definitely, we weren't healed. Not yet, maybe never fully. But for the first time I saw Madison not as the golden child but as another girl trapped inside someone else's version of love. Maybe we were both escaping at the same time. It was late afternoon when I opened the door and saw Madison standing there again. No dress this time. No smirk. Just jeans, a hoodie, and a paper coffee cup in one hand, like she wasn't sure whether to offer it or just hold on. I wasn't sure if you'd be home, she said. I live here now, I replied neutral. She nodded, glanced at the floor, then offered the cup. It's that cinnamon latte you like. I hesitated, then took it. A small gesture. Not forgiveness, but maybe acknowledgement. I'm not here to make excuses, she said quickly. Just to talk. If that's okay. I stepped aside. We sat at Aunt Diane's kitchen table. It had become a sort of confessional booth over the last few weeks. Madison kept looking around the room like it was foreign to her. It's quieter here, she finally said. I waited. I didn't know how far it all went, she said. I mean, I knew there were problems. But I didn't know they stole from you. That there was a trust fund. That Dad. She stopped. I said nothing. Just let the weight of her silence settle between us. She took a breath. I want to tell you something. About college, about why I kept failing. This was unexpected. Go on. I never wanted to study business, she said, eyes still on the table. Or pre-law. Or accounting. Every time I dropped out it wasn't because I didn't care, it was because I hated it. What did you want to do? She finally met my gaze. Teach kindergarten. The words felt oddly soft coming from her. Like she was saying something sacred. I love kids, she added with a shrug. Always have. I used to imagine having a classroom filled with colors and finger paint and story time. I blinked. You never told me that. I told Dad, she said. When I was 17. I said I wanted to go into early childhood education. He laughed. Said it was a waste of money. That I was too smart for coloring books. She took a shaky breath. And then he handed me a course catalog for business administration. Said I'd thank him one day. I remembered that year how she'd come home sullen, how our parents blamed her for not trying hard enough. I didn't thank him, she said quietly. I just kept failing, and every time he'd say I wasn't focused. That I had no direction. He made me believe I couldn't succeed, not that I was in the wrong place. I let the words hang for a while. We were so different on the surface. The golden child and the ghost in the background. But the more I listened, the more I saw it. We were both carrying versions of the same damage. Just packaged differently. He told me, I said slowly, that I was selfish for not helping more. That I didn't understand family. That sacrifice was part of love. She winced. And he told you, I continued, that you weren't enough unless you lived out his version of success. Her voice was barely a whisper. He split us on purpose, didn't he? I nodded. Because divided daughters don't talk. Don't compare notes. Don't realize the whole structure is broken. A silence fell over us, not uncomfortable but heavy. Shared. Then Madison reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. She pushed it across the table. I opened it slowly. Inside were handwritten lesson plans. Pages of ideas for classroom activities. Doodles of classroom layouts. Quotes from children's books. The word Miss Wilson's room scribbled in the corner with little stars. This is what I really wanted, she said, voice trembling. And I'm applying for it now. Grandma's helping. She said, it's time I start living for myself. I looked up at her and for the first time saw not my rival or my replacement or my resentment but my sister. Madison, I said gently, I believe you. She blinked. You do, I do. I can't forget everything. But I can see when someone's trying. She let out a breath I didn't know she'd been holding. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Elise. I just wanted you to know the truth. And I needed to hear it, I said. But I also need space. I understand. I want something better for us, I really do, I added. But it has to be built on honesty. No more secrets. No more pretending we're okay when we're not. No more taking what isn't mine, she said, with a half smile. No more giving what I can't afford, I added. We both laughed, a little tired, cautious reel. As she stood to leave, she turned back once more. You know that dress I took? She asked. Yeah, I tried it on again last night, and it looked better on you. I smiled. Damn right it did. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled slowly. I didn't know what would come of us. Maybe a cautious reconciliation. Maybe just quiet respect. Maybe someday we'd call each other sisters without all the baggage trailing behind the word. But for now, I had something just as valuable. The truth. And someone willing to carry it with me. The apartment was small, not quirky Pinterest small, just small. The kind of place where if you stretched out your arms in the kitchen, you could almost touch both walls. Where the bathroom sink was the size of a cereal bowl and the closet doubled as an existential test in minimalism. But it was mine. Well, technically it was Grandma Eleanor's, quote, a one-bedroom unit in a quiet brick building she'd owned for years, now rented to me for what she insisted was the family rate. You'll pay rent, she said, firmly handing me the keys, because I want you to know what that feels like. But it's not going to break you. You've had enough of that. And just like that, I moved into a life that wasn't borrowed or begged or squeezed between obligations. It didn't smell like resentment or control. It smelled like pine cleaner, cheap detergent, and possibility. My first night alone, I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by unopened boxes and half-assembled furniture. I ate leftover pasta straight from the container, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the quiet hum of the building. No one knocked. No one yelled from another room. No one barged in to borrow something without asking. It was unnerving at first, then it was beautiful. 2 days into unpacking, I met Ethan. He lived across the hall in apartment 3B, a designer who worked from home and played vinyl records way too loud during the day, but always turned them off by 9 p.m. sharp. We collided in the hallway, me balancing a plant and a box of mugs, him juggling a backpack and takeout bags. Whoa, sorry, he said, steadying my monstera before it tipped sideways. No worries, I replied, laughing. She's dramatic, but she'll survive. New neighbor, yeah, Elise. Just moved in. I'm Ethan. Apartment 3B, frequent abuser of spicy pad thai and Fleetwood Mac. He grinned in that easy, warm way that immediately disarmed you. Need help setting anything up, he asked. I was about to politely decline when my wrist betrayed me with a quiet pop. I winced. Maybe just the bookshelf. That evening, he helped me wrangle stubborn IKEA bolts and explained the pros and cons of matte versus glossy finish, something I hadn't known I needed to care about. As we worked, conversation flowed. Not too deep, not too shallow. Like water finding its level. He didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer it, and that at the time felt like the kindest thing. 3 days later, a package appeared at my door. No return label. Just a handwritten note taped to the top. Some things are worth returning. Love, Grandma. E. Inside was my old laptop. My breath caught. The silver case was scratched but familiar. I opened it carefully, not expecting it to even turn on, but it did. And there it was. My desktop, my research folders, my thesis outline. Photos from my summer internship. An unfinished poem, a draft email I never sent. Me. All still here. I ran my hand over the keyboard and closed my eyes, exhaling shakily. This wasn't just metal and memory, this was proof. Proof I'd built something. Proof it hadn't all been taken. Later that evening, I told Ethan. We were leaning against the balcony railing between our apartments, sharing a container of grocery store strawberries. That laptop, I said, it had everything. And for a while, I thought it was gone forever. What changed? Someone believed I was worth giving it back to. He didn't pry, just nodded. Quiet understanding in his posture. You know, he said after a while, a lot of people don't restart at 22 with nothing but a second-hand couch and frozen lasagna and make it look graceful. I laughed. You've seen my apartment. Graceful is generous. I said what I said, he replied, smiling. The next day, I booted up the laptop and reopened my thesis. I emailed my advisor. Explained what happened in brief, respectful terms. Family emergency, laptop theft. Attempting to recover data. Within hours, she replied with warmth and compassion. Take 2 extra weeks. Life happens. Resilience matters more than deadlines. The extension was a lifeline, but more than that, it was a reminder I hadn't lost everything. I was still in the story. That weekend, I hosted a soft housewarming. No gifts, just friends, folding chairs, and homemade chili from Olivia. Jessica brought candles. Nathan brought sparkling cider. Ethan popped in briefly with a basket of oranges and a note that said, "For color and vitamin C." It wasn't a celebration of luxury, it was a celebration of ownership. Not over a property. Over myself. I'd spent years living within rules written by other people. Performing gratitude for scraps. Apologizing for wanting space, rest, respect. This apartment, this tiny, imperfect, quiet corner of the city, was more than shelter. It was a boundary. A start. A reclamation. Later that night, after the laughter faded and dishes were drying on towels, I opened my laptop again. There it was. A photo I'd taken years ago. Me at 16 in front of the old house holding my acceptance letter to college. In the corner of the picture was Madison, blurry and mid-jump, yelling something I couldn't remember now. I stared at it for a long time. And instead of sadness, I felt gratitude, not for what they took, but for what I'd finally chosen to build. On my own terms. With my own hands. From a kitchen the size of a closet but a future wide as the sky. The day I walked across the graduation stage, the sky was overcast, but I felt weightless. Not just because the ceremony marked the end of sleepless nights, research deadlines, and cafeteria coffee. But because I was finally walking away from something invisible but far heavier, years of silence, obligation, and emotional erosion. I wore a simple white dress beneath the gown, a pair of flats borrowed from Olivia, and a necklace I hadn't taken off since Grandma Eleanor gave it to me, a small silver mountain. "You've already climbed farther than most ever will," she'd told me, fastening it around my neck. "You just didn't do it for applause." The applause came anyway, loud and real, as I shook hands with the Dean diploma firm in my grip. I spotted Olivia whooping in the crowd, Madison clapping with damp eyes beside her, and Richard from the diner, my first boss, my first real encourager, snapping photos with proud dad energy. No sign of my parents. I didn't expect them. And that surprisingly felt okay. 2 weeks later, I started my new job at a marketing agency in the city, one with windows, ergonomic chairs, and people who looked me in the eye when they spoke. Allison, the creative director, had hired me not just for my GPA or portfolio, but because, as she said, anyone who rebuilds from nothing is exactly the kind of grit I want on my team. I wasn't just employed, I was respected, but healing wasn't linear. For every good day, there were moments of echoing self-doubt, body, memories of old criticisms, reflexive guilt for feeling joy. So I started therapy. With Dr. Vanessa Torres, a warm-eyed woman who specialized in family systems and adult children of emotional neglect. She didn't offer quick fixes, she offered questions. Who benefits when you silence yourself? What would it feel like to be angry without guilt? Can you separate grief from longing? The work was hard but clarifying. I began to see how my childhood hadn't made me strong, it had made me vigilant. That hyper-independence wasn't maturity, it was survival. That love without boundaries isn't love, it's control in disguise. And most importantly, that I could choose differently now. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived at my apartment. No return address, just my name in Madison's handwriting. Inside was a check for $6,000. Taped to it was a note: "I know money can't fix what I helped break. But it's the amount Dad demanded from you. This time it's yours. Because I'm finally learning what love really looks like." I sat with it for a long time. Not crying, not overwhelmed, just steady. This wasn't a repair, this was a beginning. My parents tried too, sort of. First came a card from my mother, "I miss my girls. Let's heal together." Then a voicemail from my father quoting vague scriptures about forgiveness. I replied with a letter. Not cruel. Not cold. Just clear. Healing is possible, but not without truth, not without responsibility, not without you seeing what you've done and owning it. Until then, I'm choosing space. Their response. More silence. And oddly, that felt like progress. Because I had stopped begging people to change just so I could love them safely. Now I simply required it. One Saturday, Grandma Eleanor invited me upstate for a drive. Just the two of us. We talked about work therapy, Madison's college essays. She asked about Ethan, our slow-blooming friendship that was starting to feel like something more. I asked about her garden. As the sun dipped behind the trees, she turned down a gravel road. "I want to show you something," she said. We pulled up to a small weathered cabin nestled at the edge of a forested mountain. The roof was old but sturdy, the porch wide and waiting for rocking chairs. "Your grandfather bought this land before you were born," she said. "He used to say, 'That oldest girl, she's got a mountain soul. She needs her own sky.'" I turned to her slowly. "He always meant for it to be yours," she said, pressing a folded document into my hand. It was the deed. My name on it. Not as renter, not as dependent. As owner. Tears came fast and hot. "Why now?" I whispered. She smiled. "Because you're ready. You know who you are. You've stopped shrinking to fit where you don't belong." I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. It wasn't about the house. It was what it represented. Freedom without fear, inheritance without strings. Love that wasn't conditional or transactional or clawed from the jaws of manipulation. Just love. That night I sat alone on the porch steps, moonlight spilling across the field. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Made too much chili. Want some company?" I smiled, typed back. "Tomorrow. Tonight's for me." Because tonight, for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Didn't feel the urge to check in or overgive or apologize for resting. I just let myself be, whole, worthy, unowned. The apartment smelled like vanilla rosemary and something warm baking in the oven, Madison's banana bread, which had against all odds become a birthday tradition. "You're officially old," Olivia declared, plopping down beside me with a grin. 23, I replied, mock somber, so ancient. The living room was filled with familiar voices and gentle chaos. Ethan was trying to untangle fairy lights with Tyler. Grandma Eleanor was holding court at the kitchen table, trading sarcastic jabs with Jessica. Someone had brought sparklers. Someone else had spilled cider on the rug. I didn't care. It was my birthday. But not like before. Not like 22, the one that split my life into before and after. This one felt whole. Not perfect. Not easy, but earned. When the lights dimmed and the cake appeared, chocolate, my favorite, homemade by Diane, everyone gathered around. There were 23 candles, no tricks, no sudden demands, no guilt hidden behind gifts. Just flame flickering and soft. Madison leaned in, "Make a wish." I stared at the candles. I didn't feel the familiar pull to ask for something: acceptance, freedom, peace, love. I wasn't holding my breath for validation. I wasn't bargaining with the universe. I just smiled. "I don't need to," I said quietly. "I already have everything I need." Then I blew out the candles in one breath and the room erupted in applause and laughter. Ethan caught my eye from across the room. His smile was steady and kind, the kind that never asked me to be anything but myself. Later, after dishes were stacked, leftovers packed and goodbyes exchanged, I stepped out onto the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders. The city stretched before me, glittering and alive. Behind me, someone moved quietly and joined me. Grandma Eleanor. "I can't believe how far you've come in just a year," she said. "Neither can I." "You know," she added, her voice low, "your grandfather always believed you were the one who'd change things." I turned to her, surprised. "He saw how they were raising you. The way they kept you small. He used to tell me, that girl will break the cycle. She's got fire under all that quiet. I swallowed hard. You did it, Elise, she said. Not with rage, not by burning everything down, but by drawing a line and walking past it. I looked out at the skyline. I didn't lose my family, I said slowly. I just stopped chasing the version of it that hurt me. Grandma nodded. And built your own instead. Inside, Ethan was gathering coats. Madison was helping Grandma with her bag. Olivia was humming some pop song off-key. The apartment glowed not from the lights but from what we'd all brought into it: truth, effort, repair, laughter, time. Not all of it was fixed. Some wounds took longer. But this felt like a beginning. As the door closed behind the last guest, I stood for a while in the quiet. Not empty quiet, full, peaceful. I curled up on the couch with a mug of tea, the silver mountain necklace cool against my skin. On the wall pinned above my desk was the letter I'd written to myself in therapy a few months ago. Just one sentence: you do not need to bleed to belong. I smiled, tracing the words with my eyes. Not all families are built from blood. Some are built from choice. From boundaries. From beginning again. And I had chosen mine. Not because they made the pain disappear, but because they never asked me to earn love through silence or sacrifice. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, rustling like applause. The stars blinked down as if to say, you made it. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed them.